But now we're live.
Okay. Oh, then now we are. I didn't think we were because it didn't say, but okay, great. So Senate Government Operations, it is Tuesday, May 4th. And the first thing we're going to look at is H1. We want to get H122, which is the boards and commissions bill done. And I just got some kind of a weird message, but anyway, I think that we had already gone through the original H122 and we were all set with that. Then we went through the amendment, which I think is longer than the bill, that came to us from emergency management. And where were we, committee? Were we all okay with that? I think we were. And then we have one more possible amendment. And Ameren, do you want to read it to us and then what you wrote, and then we'll ask Sue Minter for her opinion?
For the record, Ameren Abergele Legislative Council. Madam Chair, there were a few line edits that the committee requested last time on the emergency management provisions.
Oh, right.
The language was discussed, but you have not seen it in the bill. I don't know whether you would like to go through that first.
Yeah, let's do that first.
Okay. So this new language is in, this is draft 1.3 of the H122 amendment that is posted with today's materials. And this was regarding the emergency management provisions in the amendment. You'll see on page 3, there's some additional language here so that it now reads, the Division of Emergency Management shall establish geographic boundaries and guidance documents for regional emergency planning committees in coordination with regional planning commissions and mutual aid associations. Mm-hmm. So that was added on page 3, and then you will see it was on page 4 in subdivision 5. This now reads, committees shall develop and maintain a regional plan consistent with guidance provided by the Division of Emergency Management in coordination with regional planning commissions that describes regional coordination and regionally available resources. And then in section 13 at the bottom of page 4, we found an error, and when the language changed the commission membership from 15 members to 17 members, we should have changed that 6 to an 8, which had not been done in the last draft, but it has now been done in this draft. And those are all of the changes on the emergency management provisions.
Any comments or concerns on those or questions? I think that we did talk about those, but we just, yeah. Committee, anything? We're all okay with that? Okay. Thank you, Ameren. Thank you, Erica.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're okay with adding that amendment to H122. And now, Ameren, if you would, Senator Rahm brought up the issue of the Climate Council and how their work is so compacted right now, and they're using so many outside resources, people who aren't normally involved in the process. And the question was whether we could increase their per diems if they needed them to be increased, because many of the people aren't taking per diems because they're actually paid for in their other roles. So Ameren has written one, and it is, I believe, on our webpage, and I think we maybe all got it. So if you would just read that, and then we'll hear from Sue about whether that meets their needs.
Certainly. So this is posted as H122 Climate Council per diem proposal. It is a 1 page. This would add section 11A to H122, Vermont Climate Council temporary per diem compensation with a sunset. until June 30th, 2022, and notwithstanding any provision of 10 VSA 591G or 32 VSA 1010 to the contrary, a Vermont Climate Council member or subcommittee member who is entitled to per diem compensation under 10 VSA 591G shall, upon request, receive per diem compensation in the amount of $100, subject to the availability of funds budgeted for council per diem compensation. And just as background for the draft, the request was to permit the council to provide higher compensation, per diem compensation amounts. And the committee's request was that it still remain within those funds that are currently budgeted for per diem compensation. And I did speak with the general counsel and the finance director at the Agency of Natural Resources, who are the ones who administer the per diems for the Climate Council. And the request was to have a specific per diem amount, both for budgeting purposes and just for equity, so they can be sure that anyone who's asking for a per diem while there are funds available is getting the same amount. That is where we are.
So Sue, would you like to just very briefly talk about why this might be a good thing to do? And welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello to everyone. And I really appreciate your taking this up, especially at this late date. I know you're in the race for the home stretch, right? And I want to underscore that this will not have any budget implications because we are looking to address through existing budget allocated for the Climate Council. So for the record, my name is Sue Minter, and I'm the Executive Director at Capstone Community Action, and also your Senate appointee, one of them, to the Vermont Climate Council, which you all established under the Global Warming Solutions Act. And I am a representative of the the Vermont Community Action Network, which advocates on behalf of low-income Vermonters and advancing equity. So I want to just quickly mention that our council that you established has 23 members. Of those 23, there is only one who is a member of the BIPOC community. I offered to be and was selected to be a co-chair of what you established called a Just Transitions Subcommittee. The Global Warming Solutions Act establishes 4. We created an additional. So there are 5 very intensely working subcommittees. We worked really hard to expand sort of the network of people involved in this important conversation that you initiated and have given the council 1 year to develop a plan to meet incredibly important yet ambitious required reductions of greenhouse gases to meet our climate goals. The Just Transitions Subcommittee, which I co-chair, is explicitly by you authorized or encouraged to think about equity and the existing disparities, social, economic, and racial. So we felt it very important to expand the membership of our subcommittee and worked very hard to make it much more inclusive. So I'm really proud. We have members of the Indigenous community, the Black community, Latina community, youth, union, very broad representatives of or representation of multiple critically important voices in this conversation. Now, for many of these members, the recruitment had to be done very quickly, and I did a lot of outreach, and on many occasions was told, no, I cannot, I don't have a job where I can just give of my time like perhaps others can. Many of the members of the council have said, we've talked about this as a council, that those members like myself who are employed by an organization for which I'm working at this time on this work, we are not requesting per diems, nor do we intend to, but we really wanted to extend the resources that were allocated for us to those who literally don't have a job that enables them to do this and don't have the resources to kind of volunteer, which you understand how many people are involved in Vermont governance and government through the many boards and commissions you have, but the truth is that those people are able to do it because in some way they can afford to, where others really can't. And so part of what you did was encourage real growth of engagement around what are we doing on our climate to a much broader constituency group. So in various conversations, we've tried to think about how best to address this essential barrier to access to this important conversation. And we did involve a broad group, and I'm so thrilled by the very rich conversation and difficult conversations we're having. And you'll learn more about this when your session is over. But many of the people aren't continuing to come even though they wanted to. So we believe that by offering this incentive instead of $50 a day, $100 a day, that makes more real and more possible the inclusion of folks who have very little resources upon which to draw to literally volunteer their time. And on our subcommittee, we are meeting every week for 2 hours. And then the chairs meet for 2, 3, 4 hours. We are working very hard on your behalf, and I look forward to talking more about it. But that is, in essence, the purpose of this request, to really address equity, to help improve access to much broader range of voices that I think you explicitly asked for in your act that you voted for. And again, thank you, because the body has already budgeted some dollars for the council, and we believe we have adequate resources within that budget to address this idea of offering the $100 per diem advancement. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, committee? Senator Collmore?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was willing to allow the Climate Council to manage this situation itself, but I'm not comfortable specifying $100. Because I don't feel comfortable doing that. I would much rather see the council decide who gets what.
That actually was my initial thing, and I think that there were some concerns raised by the Secretary of ANR or by the legal counsel, but around doing that. And I wonder if, Sue, you can respond to that.
What I can respond to is the various other efforts we've tried to devise to not even involve you and to do it literally through philanthropic arenas. And in fact, we know philanthropists interested in supporting this. The challenge is that a nonprofit like ours really cannot become a fiscal agent without taking on legal responsibility for everything that the council is doing. So how do we allocate resources to others through a nonprofit is in itself a sticky wicket, unfortunately. Now, how much we give to who, I understand the purpose of that question. I mean, one thought could be, I don't know what you do otherwise. One idea I have listening to you, Senator Collmore, was maybe we could say up to $100. So therefore, it could be based on the hours people are spending on, whether they are paid by their other job to do this work, things like that, if that addresses your concern in some way. And I do want to recognize Erica Borneman, Director Borneman is also a member of the council.
Can I also say, Madam Chair, Ameren, we had this exact conversation about do we write up to, and I think there was kind of a drafting consideration that Ameren might be able to speak to if she wants to.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy to chime in. I will say that I was also someone who raised some concerns about giving authority to the Climate Council to address the per diem compensation sort of at the council's discretion. A couple concerns, I think logistically, since the Agency of Natural Resources is the entity that has to administer the per diem, I'm not comfortable speaking to what their logistical concerns are, I guess, about having a per diem that shifts depending on whether it's member to member or whether there are tiers of compensation depending on how many hours people are putting in or the individual's member or subcommittee members' financial circumstances. But my broader legal concern, I would say, is just when the state is delegating to an entity the expenditure of state funds, that there really should be consideration given to whether the process has enough guidelines and standards that you don't result in either an arbitrary sort of disbursement of funds or even inadvertently a discriminatory disbursement of funds. And so my concerns about having an up to and giving the council sort of a unlimited discretion on how the council would like to disperse those funds is it could easily get into those areas. Not easily, it could go into those areas inadvertently. So that was an issue that I flagged. That's not to say that the council may not be able to put into place some very, clear guidelines as to how those will be dispersed. But, we were working with a limited amount of time to figure this out. And so I think we were not able to really nail down what that could look like and where the potential problems could be with that structure.
Yeah, I think that's Senator Clarkson.
So I've got a couple challenges here. One is, for a long time, we, in terms of first is equity. For a long time, we have wanted to raise the compensation for the per diem. I mean, many of us, it's been $50 for way too long, over 30 years. I have a problem with it just being for one group. I mean, this is an issue for anybody who serves in public service on a board or commission. And I think I have a hard time carving out just this one. So that's first concern. Second concern is we've appropriated quite a bit of money to the Climate Council. It certainly, they could, if they chose to spend their money in this capacity, could do so. I don't understand why, we have already delegated our authority by appropriating this effort money to function. And so I don't kind of understand why they have to come back to us to ask for this special waiver. I mean, I would think within that budget, they could do what they wanted. I mean, we've already sub-appropriated it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my two concerns.
Ameren, did you
I just
want to weigh in
want
on that? Or Sue?
Yes, let me just say briefly that the compensation is set in statute to limit it to that per diem compensation that is in 32 VSA 1010. So it is limited to the 50. So the council would need authority to use that money in a way that is inconsistent with what's required under statute.
Okay.
I would also just ask if Sue could expound on the great diversity of the Climate Council. It's probably as diverse as the Racial Equity Task Force and maybe just a few others, including the leadership of the subcommittees, where they are trying to involve more people who have not been at the table in state processes. I think that's actually a good model to look at this issue again next year. And this is a pilot for that, informing what it looks like when we have this conversation later.
I think that I hate to say this, but I don't think we need to have more discussion about, we all understand the problem. We all understand the issue. I think what we're trying to do is get to the solution in a way that does not violate any statutes, that does not put an undue burden on Capstone. That's what you are, right? Capstone. Okay, I knew it was Cap something. Capstone.
She's a Cap agency, and she's
to
a
figure out how to disperse them, and to not look at it, not to single out this one project. I think that there are issues here that we need to address, and I don't think we need more information about why it's a problem. I think we all get that.
It's been a problem for a while, and is you could say that about the diversity of everybody in all these boards and commissions. I mean, obviously, particularly with the Climate Council, we've asked for this and we've wanted to ensure this, but this ought to be as throughout state government and for all our boards and commissions. And that's why the equity piece is so important, that this, and that a single carve out for just the Climate Council is, I'm just having a hard time with this because I've wanted to change this for so long.
And the boards and commissions sunset, whatever that is called, and both Brian and I are on that committee in the summer. This summer, one of our charges is to look at per diems across the board and how we can make it more equitable and how we can look at per diems without, I mean, that's one of our charges. So I don't know where, yeah, Brian, Senator Colomar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Senator Clarkson, and that was part of my rationale for my first statement, was that we're opening the door for increased compensation across the board if we do this. I'm wondering whether Ameren might be able to suggest a way under, let me look this up here, 10 VSA 591G for different language in this particular situation that would allow them more flexibility without being specific about, in other words, if someone's going to meet for 2 hours and they're getting $100 a day to do that, that's going to put them at odds with people that might meet for a whole day and get the same amount of money. So I'm trying to, I understand what the problem is, but I just am still having trouble with the specificity of the $100. I mean, maybe we make it 75. I don't know what the answer is. I would rather have the Climate Council sit down and say, you know what, Joan's been here for every single meeting. This is what we feel she should get. You know, unfortunately, John was only able to attend one meeting, and I don't know how to do it, but is that an avenue, Ameren, that you could possibly explore, or are we kind of stuck?
If the concern is that there are individuals who are going to meetings that are lengthier meetings, such that the $50 really only works out to about $10 an hour instead of $25 an hour, you could make the $100 tied to a longer meeting length, such as if the meeting, you know, 4 meetings where the committee meets, your subcommittee meets for 4 hours or more.
I think that gets really, really complicated.
And that's that's not necessarily ideal, because guess what? The meetings will last exactly how long they have to get the, you know, appropriate monetary response, so to speak. So I'm just, I don't know where to go with it. I really don't.
So can I ask Sue a question? You mentioned that you were working with some philanthropic groups to help out with this. I mean, with the whole council and the whole project. Is it, I have no idea how many people we're talking about. Is it possible to just ask somebody who has a buttload of money, and there are people out there who have a lot of money, who believe in this, to help you to reimburse those people who, and just stick with the $50 per diem and just compensate them through some nonprofit contribution. I don't know at all, but it seems to me that would be even much cleaner and would answer a lot of these questions. So,
well, I will just thank you. Say we started there, and I think you're right that there are donors who would love to support this. The issue is that it isn't really something that a nonprofit, even one as you know, substantial, the Vermont Community Foundation, for example, cannot do this. Capstone cannot do it, and it has to do with the legality of once we become a fiduciary agent in this sense and pay someone a 1099, we become at some level legally responsible for the work of the council. So that's thing one. One thing we've done in the past, but on a much different scale, is to bring people together, and participants were given a gift card to a grocery store. That's how we've been able to do, because we can't give people cash. We can't, it's more complicated the further you get into it. But this is why we can continue to see if there is an organization willing to take the risk. Our auditors, I mean, we really tried at Capstone to take this on, and there were enough challenges that we came back. And at the same time, Senator Rahm was suggesting this path, because, as you know, we actually are, or you may not know this, but we're underutilizing the $50 per day Diem budgeted. So we thought this was an approach to keep going through the formal process. Now, what occurs to me, and I thought Senator Collmore, you were going in this direction, could Ledge Council think of language that gives the council or A&R this funding to, with some discretion, essentially giving an exception to the per diem, maybe to allow more discretion on the allocations and give them that authority that I think you feel like you've given the council that authority, but in fact, we don't have authority, as I understand it, to change the payment. But it doesn't answer Senator Clarkson's real concern about every other board and commission, and I know that's a huge one.
And I think that there are also questions that Amron raised about if there are appropriate guidelines that the council would be using to distribute those funds, if they have complete discretion to decide whether somebody gets $50 or $70 or $100, what are the guidelines, and could it become a decision that could seem almost capricious and sometimes discriminatory? We're not going to give to farmers from the Northeast Kingdom, but we're going to give to farmers from Windsor County. I mean,
so may I add something, Madam Chair? I mean, I think at the core here, there is a major thing that the boards and commissions group need to resolve, which is per diems for attendance and participation in boards and commissions was never meant to be pay. It was never,
right.
It's not meant to compensate you for lost time, or we'd be paying lawyers $500 an hour to participate. I mean, I don't believe the $50 per, I mean, so I think what the challenge is here, this is the cart coming before the horse. The conversation needs to be had. This is an important conversation, because are we compensating people as real compensation, or is this a token as a thank you for public service? And it has always been a token. And this shift to paying people for their time lost is not what the boards and commission per diem was ever about. And so it's shifting what the expectation is of that pay, and it's shifting the amount in, to me, a non-equitable fashion. So the challenge here for me is this is the cart coming before the horse. Not that I don't, I was a sponsor of the Global Warming Solutions Act in the Senate. So, I mean, I fully support this work. I fully support how diverse it is. But I think this is a bigger conversation than this just one-off on this one area. And it is an equity issue for me. And I just, and it's also a question of what is the per diem meant to be? It's never been meant to be compensation for time lost serving in doing public service. It's meant to be a token. And if they change that, that's a big change, because that's a huge budgetary impact. But I think that conversation has to be full and considered. And I think that's our challenge for this conversation right now.
I just want to say, and I'll stop and listen, it is exactly why this is coming up now, because we are very used to a certain segment of the population being a part of these conversations. And we're really reaching beyond that. And if we cannot compensate people for their time adequately, we won't ever reach beyond that. And I think you understand that. And I just appreciate how difficult this is. I understand the points being made. I still wonder if there's some way to offer some authority to A&R and the council thereby more directly to make some of these decisions. I don't think we have that authority now.
What was the issue around, except for the guidelines, the lack of guidelines to putting up to? I know that the lack of guidelines was an issue. But if we just put up to, some people might get 50 and some people might get 100. Some people might get 75, and we could just leave that to the discretion of the council itself. I know that Ameren, you had issues around guidelines and just giving them the authority to spend state money.
In addition, in my conversations with the Agency of Natural Resources, there were some logistical concerns raised about having differing levels of per diems, or a per diem that shifts over time, both from a budgeting standpoint and just a processing of per diems standpoint.
Well, even if we said 100, they're going to have somebody is going to have some guidelines for, just because somebody says, I want the 100, are they going to get the 100, or is somebody going to make a decision that this is somebody who couldn't participate unless they had 100, or somebody's going to have to make the decision.
I will just say the language as it's currently written is not discretionary. If someone asked for the 100, they would get the 100.
Yeah, they get it.
I was going to say the reason that 100 was the number that was put into this draft is because that's the number that I believe the council and the Agency of Natural Resources is possible and still would keep the per diems within what is currently budgeted, given the history of how many, or I should say how few people have requested the per diem.
Okay, where are we, committee? I mean, it is a problem and we should be able to solve it, but
could we solve it independent of this bill? Because for me, part of the challenge is this bill. I mean, part of the challenge is the thousands of people who are already taking a hit by choosing to serve and do public service in a board and commission, for whom many, for many, it is a challenge to give up a day. Not everybody's paid. You know, a farmer is a good example. A farmer giving up time to go on a milk commission is a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody, but it's also a challenge for us to get more diverse participation on all our boards and commissions. It strikes me that putting it here sets a precedent for boards and commissions. Is there another way we could solve this in another bill going forward for this small group of people? This isn't that many people, right? This is what? This is 50 people?
It's 23.
Is it how many? 23?
Well, there are 23 members of the council, and now we've probably at least doubled that.
Different. So how many people do we think this actually is, Sue?
I know that the fiscal agent for A&R knows the number, but what they've budgeted is based on the number of people, and like doubling the number of people who've currently even applied for the per diems, which is only 6 apparently.
Right.
So we don't expect that many, and you're right. It's really for people who need it, and because we've had these conversations around, can we move the money that might have been for people like me who isn't going to request it for this very reason? Could we somehow allocate those resources to those who really need it? And frankly, in my subcommittee, we're losing people because they really can't allocate the time, but they might, I think, if we were able to compensate them. And I get your point. It's not true compensation.
It's not. And the problem is that our answer now you're not going to get this for next week's meeting. I mean, this is going to be, it'll take, as you know, time for this to go through the process anyway. I mean, it will help if they know it is coming, but
Yes, it will. Yeah.
I guess I'd like to think about whether there's another vehicle for this. If this is the vehicle, I'd like to make it clear it's an exception and that the conversation is going to be taken up about an equitable review of board and commission compensation is the wrong word. But
Well, you have, it will be taken up. John Gannon and I are chairs of this committee. I mean, of the boards
yeah,
and
but
commissions.
I'm just saying, framing this as an exception in light of the fact that we're going to have that you're going to have this bigger discussion, and that we will have a recommendation hopefully for next year's session. I just can't. I want to frame it with some perspective about our commitment to doing additional work
Okay,
on all the boards and commissions,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
because given the need for, as long as we've had the need, it sticks in the craw to just do it for this.
All right. So where are we? Where are we, committee, with this? Anthony, you have been very quiet.
I know I have been. It's a tough one. I mean, my heart wants to go with giving people the higher reimbursement for sure, like the amendment says, but my brain says that, it's not really fair to do it for one commission and not others. I think everybody needs a higher reimbursement. So I'm sort of leaning towards the direction of saying we can't do it this time because we can't do it for everybody. I wonder whether there would be a way to say, this may be really off the wall, but to go ahead and do it, allow the higher reimbursement, and say that in terms of the broader conversation that we're using this one as a model to see if offering a higher per diem would actually encourage and increase participation. So like we sort of use this as a put this one under a microscope, so to speak, and like try to see if we can use it as a way to determine if higher compensation actually will make a difference to attendance.
That might be good. That was the sort of framing that when I said we need to frame it in a way that I could deal with it.
So we could say that we're doing it for this commission, but we're going to actually evaluate whether it works better for this, whether this commission has better attendance and better workload diversity because of the higher compensation.
Well, actually, I think we know that it would make a difference. And it would probably make a difference for legislators also if they had higher pay. And,
yeah,
I have to say that every time in the summertime we have a meeting that we have to go to, I lose income.
Sure.
Even though I get my per diem, which isn't $50, I get my per diem, but I lose income every time I go to a meeting. So I'm sure there are legislators who also would like a higher per diem, even though we get it because we're losing money. So Brian
had a thought.
Yeah, I see that. Senator Colmer.
Thank you. I was waiting to get called on.
I didn't know.
Yes, I do not look at a speaker thing, so I see everybody.
And I appreciate Senator Polina's idea. The issue there, though, if we're talking about equity and someone else is on a summer study committee, they're not going to get it. And so they're going to feel that it's not fair that you only picked one particular group to get it, even though we've already made a promise that we're going to deal with it on the Sunset Advisory Commission at some point this summer. That's not going to help someone else that's on a different board or commission all summer long. So I appreciate what you're saying, Senator Polina, and I agree that it should be equal, but it won't be equal because we're specifically saying it won't be equal.
Right, I hear you. Point well taken.
Well, I know that it's a problem doing it through, and I wasn't thinking of, Sue, when I suggested that through a philanthropic kind of model. I wasn't thinking of a nonprofit doing it. I was thinking of somebody who has an interest in this field, who has money, can just give the people who can't attend, give them an extra $50 as a gift.
And I wonder if we have any idea what that amount would be. If we said, if we went to a philanthropic person, I mean, are we talking about a couple of $1,000s? Are we talking about more? I'm just curious what the amount would be.
That's why I asked about the number of people on these subcommittees that would need it. Because I think you could get it and just get a direct payment to those individuals. Oh, Amaranth has a problem with that, I can see.
I just wanted to raise what could be a concern with having private entities paying individuals to perform a civic duty or be representing the government on a board or commission. I do believe that there are ways for private entities to donate money to the state to be used for programs. I think this is through the Joint Fiscal Office.
We just lost our chair.
Oh, we did.
So
should I pause?
I think we either need to find out what happened because we have caucus in a few minutes and she's on deck in caucus to discuss pensions. So let me just call her and see what, Gail, are you calling her?
I believe she froze up right before she disappeared.
Yeah, let me.
Senator Clarkson, I do not have her phone number.
We'll rectify that. Let me call her.
I did want to mention that I know that the ANR has done a calculation of potential or likely, they've projected what this would cost. So I just don't have that projection, I'm sorry to say.
She may have lost power because when her home phone doesn't ring, when it makes this certain sound, it's often when she has lost power. Having done this now several times.
Right, yeah, really, we lose her every once in a while. Well,
yeah, I'm trying her new cell phone, see if she uses it.
I know Amarin was about to talk about
the
possibility of joint fiscal receiving money, because we heard that the state of Maine, the entire Global Warming Solutions Act or whatever Climate Council that this is modeled after, as I understand it, it was essentially almost entirely funded by donations, as I understand it, maybe to a joint fiscal or maybe to an agency directly. I don't know, Amarin. It sounded interesting to hear that. I'd never heard of it.
And I don't know too many details about that. I don't know if I should continue talking or if we should wait and see.
I just wanted
Senator Clarkson is able to reach her.
Right, I wanted to see if Allison got in, had any luck reaching her before we continue. She's talking to someone.
I'm talking to Jeanette's cell phone, which she's. So anyway, it sounds like, in my experience now of Zoom Life with Chair White, that she's lost power, and
so why don't we? We were not going to be able to vote this out today anyway, so we'll revisit this question in the coming days, whether it's tomorrow or the next day. I would say maybe we let Amarin finish her thought about the private money, which I think she was in the middle of.
Yes, I apologize. Sorry, I just wanted to give us all a heads up. We'd lost Jeanette.
No, that was good. It's good to know. We want to miss her when she's gone. So if you could finish your thought, Amarin, and then someone could try to find out if ANR has come up with a number as to what this might cost, and we can continue the discussion the next time we meet. But Amarin, do you want to finish your thought anyway that you were expressing?
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to remember where I left off. So one, I think it would be worth looking into what opportunities there are to have private funding go through a state entity. My larger the larger concern that I would flag about having private entities giving compensation or other gifts in kind to members of committees and subcommittees is that it does have the potential to leave the Climate Council open to accusations of being influenced by
Yes, that's
those
true.
entities that are providing compensation or some other in-kind sort of donation.
Because it
So I
would be
wanted
seen
to
as a
flag
gift
that.
to those individuals.
Mhm. And I don't know that the Climate Council would, what the Climate Council would use as criteria for determining what entity is okay to give, to provide that, and what entities are not okay, or whether they would just have to accept all, in which case I think you might find yourself in a situation that you don't mean to be in those circumstances. And I should say,
It does sound like
have,
it has the possibility of being an ethics violation or questionable ethics piece action.
it does. And I can do some more research from a legal perspective. I don't know if we have statutes or other regulations that prohibit that. That's not something I've looked into before. So I would want to look into that if this is an area the committee wants to explore further, the direct private to committee or subcommittee member compensation transfer.
Because the other question about it would be, I mean, let's say we find out it could happen. It's possible to allow it to happen. I don't expect this committee to go out and look for the philanthropists to like donate the money. We're not going to be asking people to donate money, I don't think. That would put us in a very odd situation, odd predicament. So I would, unless people, I mean, I would, Emran, if you could look into it a little bit more though, just so we can be more certain, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Maybe look at the Joint Fiscal Office Avenue and see if that is a possibility.
I will do that.
And
Allison?
I just think to sort of go to your suggestion and my idea about how we might frame up this particular need that's so immediate that my heart wants to respond to, but given my history with this issue, my head is, as you were saying, Anthony, is divided. So if Amron could think of a way we could frame it up so that we don't get the cart before the horse, so that we do answer this issue, that would be helpful. And I sadly need to go to chair caucus in a minute. And Anthony, I may have to ask you to present the pensions stuff.
Well, also, before we leave though, I wanted to see if Senator Rahm has any final comments, since it was her proposal to begin with.
Well, I guess just two quick things were on my mind. I agree, Senator Polina. I just think even if we looked holistically at this issue, state government with as many boards and commissions as it has is probably not going to greatly increase the overall allocation for stipends that it provides. And that, there are boards and commissions where there's a lot of work being asked for. There are private entities and foundations that are really looking at how to rebalance civic participation and who can engage. So I think at some point we're going to need to answer the question about, philanthropic dollars going to support civic engagement and participation. In fact, as I've said before, I was part of a project where with external partners, we were able to pay, folks for information that informed Department of Health, ANR, and other agencies. And even that, they even had to sort of have that discomfort, sort of dealt with around funding efforts that paid people directly to engage in civic work. But that greatly increased the diversity. Everyone who was there who works in state or local government said they had never seen those cross sections of participants in Rutland and Newport, where we were able to pay people who said, I wasn't able to put gas in my tank to come to a meeting like this before. I would have never been able to do this without a meal. It's a really cold day, and I appreciate having a warm meal and meeting with my neighbors, and getting $20. That kind of stuff changes who's at the table to participate. So I think, unless we had these small examples that came up, we wouldn't be able to look at the bigger picture and say, what's going to work? What isn't going to work? So I'm glad we're having this conversation. I really thank Sue. I think she is doing a tremendous job on the Climate Council in general. They're trying to change who can help lead and chair, which is another burden. They're trying to change, so it's not just about the Climate Council, but it is about a large council that's really trying to meet the moment and change who's at the table. And I think that's something worth learning from now and next year. I just, obviously really worry that if we didn't try to learn the lessons with the Climate Council now, there's a lot of folks who could come back next year and say, this is a really critical set of investments we want to make in climate. This is important for our whole state. And we weren't really able to give, 4+ hours a week to this effort, as others are who have the disposable income, the resources, the flexibility, the warm house, the stable internet, which I know our chair, is falling victim to here. But I just think we're going to have a lot of big questions next year, or when this group meets to take up this issue. And let's take a council we all care about and start to, get some of those answers, have some case studies about what happens when you change how people are compensated to come to the table.
So, yeah, I think that goes to how can we frame this in a way that we can use it to learn from, anyway. So I think
we should all think on that till next time. I don't know when this will come up. I don't know. I haven't been following the scheduling with Gail, but it's been sometime in the next couple of days. We'll revisit this, I'm sure. And Ameren, if you could look into it as much as possible, that would be great. And Sue, thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it. We'll invite you back next time we talk about it.
Thanks for the robust discussion.
We do need to get to a